Hello and welcome to my studio. I'm Amber and I design patterns for knitters. Today I have a tutorial for you for the Astria Shawl design. This is a striped version and here is the other option, the mini skein fade version. And there's so many possibilities with colour with the Astria Shawl. I'm sure you'll have fun creating yours. Certainly worth looking through the Ravelry project pages and also Instagram #Astria Shawl to see some really inspiring versions knit already. I created a tutorial today for some of the techniques involved in knitting this shawl. It begins with a Turkish cast on here, and it's worth watching the video section for that to work out how to get started. Once you get going, it's garter stitch and quite straightforward. You'll work increases in the arch shape and then work each of the wings, I call them, separately. Once you finish the garter stitch part, then you'll be picking up stitches all the way around the edge, and the video will explain the best way to do that. Then work an I-cord bind off around the edge, which is also in this tutorial. And to finish up, I'll show you how to block it. Turkish cast on. Today I'll be demonstrating 50 stitches across the two needles, so 25 stitches per needle. So I just have a smaller set of cables. If I were casting on a larger number, then I would use a longer cable. Begin with a slip knot on the bottom needle. And then it's quite simply winding the yarn around the needle. So I go from underneath, I hold that firm with my forefinger and keep the needles parallel and wrap once. The slip knot here will be removed, so don't count that as a stitch. So that first wrap is 2 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 42, 4, 6, 8, 50. 25 stitches on each needle, and I'll secure that yarn behind and work across the top needle stitches and then back around across the bottom needle stitches. So I'll pull the bottom needle out so that I can use it to work across that top needle. I'm going to place markers as I go here for the particular pattern that I'm knitting. I will need markers in place. So according to the setup instructions, it says knit. Some patterns may say purl for this first row after casting on, wrapping the stitches. Here I need to knit 21 stitches and place the first marker. So 21 stitches will leave me with 4, 2, 4, 2 more. Place the first marker, and then I'm placing them every 2 stitches. Two, so I've knit across the top 25 stitches, and now I'm going to turn my work so that is now the bottom needle, and I'll work across what was the bottom stitches. So flip around, pull that bottom needle out, and to start I have that slip knot which I will take off and release, and then bring that working yarn behind. Again, I'll continue the setup, which is knit another 2 stitches, place a marker, another 2, and then knit to the end. So I have cast on and knit across the 25 stitches on each needle. If I were to be working my project in the round, if I was making socks or something that was centre out, I would then continue to work around in this direction and work in the round. However, this particular project, I'll be working flat and working back and forth in a U shape. So I'll turn the work around again and have the garter ridge, which is now the right side. This is row 1 and the right side of this pattern. So for row 1 for this pattern, after the setup rows, I knit across all the stitches. And the first row is complete. This is the right side. I have knit across the stitches here and then here, finishing at the top. I turn the work around and turn it over to work on what is now the wrong side. So at the start, the wrong side has this little stockingette seam, and then the right side is garter stitch, and it will continue to be garter stitch. I used this marker to help me recognise the wrong side row, so I know that the row that has this as the first marker is the wrong side row, and that is also because I have increases on that row, so it helps to prompt me. So my next instruction is to knit to the marker, slip the marker, make 1 left, knit to the marker, slip the marker, make 1 left, and then I haven't placed the marker here in between the stitches, so I'll work that increase. I'll place a marker now and work that increase so that I can keep track. So place that marker, make 1 left, and work across the second half of the stitches. And then knit to the end. Turn the work, and now I'm back on the right side with the garter ridges. And I will continue to knit back and forth in this direction and then turn the work and work in this way. So I'm working the U shape back and forth. Picking up the stitches for the I-cord edging and bind off. I'll be using the long set of circular needles for this, as I'll be picking up many stitches all the way around the edge of the shawl, so I'll need to be able to hold a lot of stitches. If you don't have a really long set of circulars, you can use 2 shorter sets that will still work. I'm working the last row here, just knitting the stitches onto the longer circular needles. You can just slide them across if you've already knit that final row. So I'll be using the colour that I want my I-cord to be in, which is the main colour in the striped shawl project. And I'll be picking stitches up initially along the bottom edge of the shawl, which I'm showing you here. I'll be picking up one stitch for every 2 rows or per garter ridge. I insert the needle in between the garter ridges and am lifting 2 bars of yarn worked in the 2 rows. So the 2 rows equals 1 garter ridge, and I'll be picking up 1 stitch per garter ridge or 1 stitch per 2 rows. So I insert the needle and lift up those 2 bars of yarn and then knit a stitch. So that's picking up and knitting 1 stitch. I slowed that down so you could see it, and I'll continue along picking up and knitting 1 stitch per garter ridge. This will give you a nice neat edge, and it's reasonably straightforward to do. So picking up and knitting and continue along the bottom edge. I'll skip ahead and show you some progress along the way, as there's a few little tricky bits as the shawl continues, where be picking up the stitches that are held on yarn, and also the other pointy end is a little bit tricky, so I'll show you how I worked that. Okay, so I've worked along the bottom of the shawl and picked up all the stitches along the way, and I'm ready to pick up the stitches held earlier from the right side, and I'll pull out the needle and use a magic loop technique to be able to work around that tight corner. So I'll keep the cable loose, which will enable me to be able to work around the corner there. I will put those stitches, the held stitches, onto the shorter set of needles, just to knit across, and then I'll knit them onto the long set of needles. So I will knit across the held stitches, and then put aside that small set of needles. I won't need those again for a little while, and continue to pick up stitches across the top of the shawl at the same rate as the bottom, 1 stitch per every 2 rows or 1 stitch per garter ridge. I'll continue along until I get to the held stitches in the centre of the shawl and show you what I do there. I've worked my way across to those centre held stitches, and again I'll use my other set of needles and place the stitches onto the needles so that I can easily knit across them. All the held stitches are now on my other needles. Pull out the yarn holding them and knit across those. Okay, I've finished knitting across those stitches. I won't need that needle anymore. And I'll continue to pick up and knit stitches for the final section of the edge. And just kind of wriggle all the stitches around my cable so that everything fits on. It does become a bit of a squeeze, but I managed to squeeze them all on. And continue to the end. We've picked up all the stitches and it's time to work the I-cord bind off. We'll continue to work in the same direction that we picked up the stitches in, so we'll be working in the round. So be sure to keep the right side of the work facing you. We'll start by casting 3 stitches on using the backward loop method onto the left needle. And we'll do that by using our thumb to pick up the yarn, loop it around the thumb, and then insert the needle through the yarn and slide it off the yarn and onto the needle. So you'll have loops cast onto the left needle. Then to work the I-cord bind off, you'll knit the first 2 stitches that are on the left needle. So the first 2 will be the cast on stitches that you just cast on. And then you will knit the 3rd cast on stitch plus one of the picked up stitches together through the back loop. And that will mean 1 stitch has been bound off. At the same time, you'll be creating the I-cord tube. So after you've knit the 2 together, slide the 3 stitches back from the right needle across to the left needle and repeat the process. So now we'll go back into real-time knitting. Knit across 2 stitches and then knit 2 stitches through the back loop. 1 stitch cast off. Slide those 3 worked stitches back over to the left needle and repeat. It will take a while to bind off and create the edging for this shawl. I think it's worth it though. It's such a beautiful result. Such a neat, lovely finish. So there's a tiny little bit of I-cord forming there. Skipping ahead, and you can see the nice edge forming along the bottom of the shawl. So working in the same direction as the picked up stitches. And finished. Now it's time to block the shawl. Blocking. For best results, I recommend that you wet block your project, soak it in some water for half an hour, and then use a towel to wring it out so that it absorbs excess moisture and lay it out onto your blocking mats. I found that I didn't need to pin it out. It holds its own shape quite beautifully, and I didn't really want to stretch the project out. So I just patted it into shape, pushing and patting and gently manipulating it, and found that I had an excellent result with the shawl doing that, but it definitely needs blocking to achieve this. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Links to the pattern are below and also ways that you can connect with me. See you next time. Bye.